Don't Let the Peas Touch, and Other Stories by Deborah Blumenthal. Please don't let the peas touch. Sophie's big sister Anna was taking a cooking class, and this weekend she was supposed to help make all the family's meals. But every time Sophie sat down to eat, something was wrong on her plate. At breakfast, milk was in her cereal when she didn't want it to be there, so she held her nose with one hand while she drained off the milk with the other. Then she sifted through the cereal to screen out a raisin. "Do you like the pit part?" Sophie asked her father. He rolled his eyes. "A raisin doesn't have a pit. Just eat the whole thing." "Never mind, the raisins were a nice touch, Annie," said her mother. She glared at Sophie, but Sophie was too busy doing raisin surgery to notice. At lunch, Anna made everyone roast beef sandwiches. Sophie opened hers and held up squares of meat in front of the window. "What are you doing now?" her mother asked. "Looking for fat," Sophie said. "There's no fat," her mother said. "Annie cut up all the fat." "Not this," Sophie said, shaking a zigzag of gristle. She balled up the meat and hid it under her plate.
"You're so gross," Annie yelled at Sophie. "Am not," Sophie yelled back. "Are too," Annie screamed. "Stop," their mother said. "Both of you." For dinner, Annie said she was going to make something that everyone would love. She waved her arms around and said, "Tonight, I will prepare a special recipe from a French cookbook." Everyone waited and waited until Annie finally came out of the kitchen. She was wearing the tallest hat that Sophie had ever seen. In her hand was a big pan. Annie lifted the lid high up into the air and then bowed and said, "The best blue cheese omelet." "Ooh la la," their mother said. She took a fork. "Just delicious," she said in a television voice, blowing Annie a kiss. With his mouth full, their father saluted Annie, but Sophie just waved Annie away. "Ew, don't give me any of that," she said, draping a napkin over her head. "It's so stinky." Annie pushed her face next to Sophie's. "There's no cheese in your omelet, none whatsoever." Annie put the plain omelet in front of Sophie with a flourish. For a moment, everything was calm. Then Annie served the side dish. "Oh no," Sophie yelled. "The peas are touching." "So what if they're touching?" Annie yelled, breathing on Sophie. "They mix in your stomach anyway." She shoved the peas away, but they rolled back. Annie grabbed French bread, wedging it between the eggs and the peas. "I hate that bread, all the crust," Sophie yelled, bumping her glass and sending a wave of water over the table. "Ew," Sophie said as a pea juice puddle drowned the bread, turning it green and soggy, floating all the food together. Her father shook his head. "Just terrible," he muttered. No one spoke for a long time. Then suddenly, Annie pounded the table with her fist. "Aha!" she shouted. She ran to the kitchen and climbed the ladder, coming down with the box. Inside, it was a strange dish. It was a big dish that held little dishes, 10 of them, and each one had walls. Best of all, it turned like a wheel. Annie held it out to Sophie like a present. "Some call it a lazy Susan. We call it a separator." So for the rest of the weekend, Annie helped Sophie separate frozen strawberries from strawberry ice cream, white icing from brown sandwich cookies, even peanut butter from jelly. And everything tasted a little better that way.